What do you make of the attempts to repeal the Affordable Care Act? Do you think ultimately that will be repealed successfully?
Well, so far, it's been a bit of a mess. Republicans are determined to repeal it without any Democratic participation through an obscure process called reconciliation. That is how it was enacted a number of years ago before I got there. But it is an unusual vehicle by which just 51 members can pass or repeal something. But it can only be something that has to do with the budget and taxes and finances. So they can, if they choose to, finish ramming through a repeal of the financial side of the Affordable Care Act, the penalties if you don't have a plan, and the taxes that pay for the Affordable Care Act. But as they're discovering in this recess, there's a lot of Americans who are concerned about repealing their access to health care without any plan to replace it. And there is not yet any consensus plan by the Republican Party in Congress. There are a number of proposals, and they have stronger and weaker components, but despite a number of attempts, there hasn't been any agreement. And if the Republicans want to repeal the Affordable Care Act without working with any Democrats and without any proposal for how to replace it and how to deal with more than 10 million Americans who will be thrown off of health care, I think there will be some real consequences for that.
If I asked you to make a prediction, if they do that without a plan in place, if they come up with a plan, then repeal it, if attempts to repeal it are unsuccessful, what would be your best guess?
My hunch is that they'll face some very tough dynamics in the House between the Freedom Caucus that insists on an immediate and full repeal, whether or not there's a replacement plan. And I think more measured conservatives who dislike the mechanisms of the Affordable Care Act but are perfectly open to trying to replace it with something that uses market mechanisms rather than federal mechanisms. It's hard for me to guess how the dynamics in the House Republican caucus will play out. But you know, my hunch is that they will end up pushing through a repeal plan without any coherent or solid replace plan. That'll have real consequences. For the state of Delaware, the Medicaid expansion, which is a big component of the Affordable Care Act, if repealed, would cost Delaware $100 million a year. So we would have a hard choice to make here in Delaware, the Governor and General Assembly, whether to roll back some of the progress we've made in terms of access to health care or pick up the additional tab.